All right, everybody. It is episode 5 of the Action Effect. Today, we are going to talk about overcoming imposter syndrome. I'm sure every single person out there has felt this. I know Dan and I feel this. But your hosts today, Zac Fischer and Dan Wiggum, and we are bringing you guys episode number 5. And before we dive in, Dan and I actually read a stat the other day that I thought was very interesting that I want to share with you guys. 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. Here we are, episode 5. Now, of the 10% of people who do make it to episode 3, 90% of them don't make it to episode 20. So we're going to make it to episode 20. And it just kind of shows you guys that if you just don't give up, you just stay consistent with things, you can eventually achieve success and wins. So, overcoming imposter syndrome. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there feel it. If you don't feel it, it's probably because you're not trying to do something impactful in life, right? So I'm not saying that as in, a derogatory way or to be mean by any means. I'm just saying that if you're just going through the motions of life and you're not feeling like an imposter in a way, then it's probably because you're not actually going out there trying to achieve something big. Because the whole reason for imposter syndrome, at least for me, and then I'll let Dan kind of chime in as well, is that I'm doing something in uncharted waters for myself, or even if it is waters I have chartered in, and maybe I am not having the success that I once was, or, whatever it is, you start to have negative thoughts in your head. You start to have fear in your head. You start to have this, man, do I really have this ability, or should I really be in this position that I'm in, or talking on this topic that I'm in? And so we have a great episode for you guys. Dan, I'll go ahead and let you also define what you feel like imposter syndrome is for you. And then we'll kind of dive in.
Yeah, no, I think it's more just it's everything that you said first, and then more so the thinking that other people don't know what you're talking about. And, there's a lot that comes along with it. I mean, I think you and I both are we're very humble from a standpoint that we're always willing to listen. We're always willing to learn and figure out what we can do better. But also from a standpoint too, when we do have to be in a position to train and coach, like our sales reps or whatever, we have to, sometimes we feel like, are we the people that should be doing this? And it's like, it's a constant battle that until you have felt it, you can't really describe it to someone, I don't think. And I go through it all the time. I'm like, why would people listen to me, right? But at the end of the day, sometimes the answers to their questions I'm able to provide, I'm able to give solid advice, and it's stuff that I'm doing from a day-to-day basis, right? And consistently talking in the manners that I tell them to talk, right? Like the certain things that I tell them to say, I do the same thing, and I've had successes on it in the past. I think both of us struggle with the ups and downs, especially in sales, and, going back and forth of feeling like, man, like I thought I had this figured out. I got to pivot. I got to adjust, but,
or business in general.
Yeah, just business in general. I think there's an element of comparison to sports, right? Like you can have a super hot streak in sports, like whatever sport you're playing, you can just have a bunch of great games in a row, and then you can go cold, right? And just be struggling and not really being able to figure it out and put things together. And the same thing with sales. I mean, sales, you can pick up some momentum, get into a groove. Everything you're saying just, sounds great. It sounds smooth. And the problem is, if you're not doing the reps, though, at the end of the day, you're not able to continue to pick that up, right?
So true.
So, yeah, I think we were kind of talking about this morning. I think for our position, both of us are feeling a level of this right now because we haven't been pushing sales for the last quarter, really. The two of us, we've kind of been doing other stuff. So for us to go and tell the sales team how to sell, like it kind of just feels like, why are we doing this? But now we figured out a position for us to be able to go and be in that every single day and lead from the front. So as we get those reps and build that momentum, we'll be able to hit that stride and then convey more about what we're actively doing to see those successes.
No, absolutely, man. I mean, you feel it in all different types of leadership. I feel it a lot in social media, posting online. I sit there and think like, okay, I posted on a topic that I may have a good knowledge of, but then I sit there and think, okay, but there's other guys who are doing 10 times what I'm doing in business and life, whatever, online, that are talking about the same topic, so to speak. And it's like, okay, well, what gives me the right to talk on this topic when someone else is talking on the same topic and they're way better? Like you take like Alex Hormozi, right? Like obviously the dude is super smart. He takes everything he's a very intellectual guy, and he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and he'll talk on a topic, and maybe I'm talking on the same type of topic. I don't talk on every topic he does, of course, but you just sit there and you're like, man, like what gives me the right to do this? I'm not worth $100 million like him, but I have had success. And so what I try to remind myself is, Zach, you're not talking to Alex Hormozi. I'm not talking to the guys who are 20 million, 50 million, 100 million. I'm talking to the people who follow me, who want to get to the level that we're at, who want to get to, okay, how do you do, 8 figures in sales? How do you do multiple 8 figures in sales? So,
I think there's an element of relatability too with where, as a guy like Alex Hormozi continues to make more and more money, he becomes less and less relatable to a lot of people. And I think that's something that helps us provide, because in the beginning we listened to different people, and then those people eventually kind of led us to listen to other more highly elevated people, right? But we never went and bashed anyone else that we were listening to either, like we'd take good points away from them. And the other thing is a guy like Alex Hormozi, if we are talking on it, I don't think he would come and bash on it, so.
No, definitely not. And that's such the key right there that you just said, is it's all internal. It's all something that we're telling ourselves, that we're making ourselves feel like we're not good enough, when in reality, anybody ahead of you in life, guys, is not going to look down on you for trying to better yourself. Every person that was a millionaire started off broke, unless they inherited the money. I'm not talking about them. Every self-made millionaire started off broke. Every real estate investor out there with a massive portfolio at one point had no houses. They had to get their first one. Every sales rep out there had to make their first sale. So if you're looking at the top rep in your company, they eventually, at one point or time, they sucked, right? And so that's this kind of the internal dialogue that we have, and we tell ourselves. And, when I look at guys social media is a mental mind fuck.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. You look at guys that are 25 years old, worth 50 million, or whatever. And when I look at those guys, some of them are extremely smart. They're tech guys or something. But when I look at guys who are like us, who are came from the same kind of environment that we did, what really stands out to me, at least what it seems, I've never met these individuals, but is that they're very confident, right? And so if they are feeling imposter syndrome, they certainly are not acting upon it, right? And so, Dan, when you feel imposter syndrome, what are some things that you kind of do to maybe fight that, overcome it, or so that it doesn't detriment you to the point where you're not taking any action? Because this is the action effect,
Yeah. Yeah. I try to just continue to do what I say I'm going to do. And I think that's one thing that a guy like Ed Milet, he talked about on his podcast one time. And I took a lot away from that as far as how to build confidence is doing exactly what you say you're going to do. And at the end of the day, you can only lie to yourself, right? Like I could lie to you all day. It doesn't really matter. But if I do lie to you, I know that that's not truthful to myself, right? It's not easy to swallow, and that makes it very hard to overcome something like that. So going through those motions and doing exactly what I say I'm going to do, taking the action, like we were talking about earlier, is, you go through X amount of appointments without a sale, right? And what are you going to do? Are you going to feel sorry about where you're at in the position that you're in to be able to have those opportunities? Or are you going to find a way to go and just learn and pivot and continue to take that action and understand, like, the story that you tell yourself, understand the person that you are and that you are capable of it. So I think that's a big thing, is just kind of using the action to be able to overcome and push through those times. Because there's definitely, you go through waves where you're like, man, like, I feel like I'm doing all the right things. I feel like I'm telling all the right things, but I also feel like the results are missing something from what I'm doing. So that's the correlation's hard. And then another big thing too is the concept of time with how we relate the results in a timely manner. Like, me and you are both we live at a very urgent level with what we want to accomplish. And sometimes I think that takes a lot away from what we actually do accomplish, because we're never actually where we want to be. So I think for us, we have to, I think we hold each other accountable to be able to, like, step back a little bit and be like, oh, hey, like we've done some pretty cool stuff. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, like, continue to have that urgency so that it forces us to take the action at a level that we continue to do. Like, me and you, we empty the tank every single day. So,
yeah. And, having each other to bounce things off of too, like when I feel imposter syndrome, I come to you and I'm like, hey man, this is how I'm feeling, like, X, Y, Z, yada, yada. You come back at me like, with positive, talk tracks or whatever it is. Right. And that's something that if you're out there and you're listening to this and you don't have somebody like that, I mean, one, you can reach out to us, right? I'd be more than happy to talk to you on Instagram, or, find somebody that's wanting to do the same things that you are, achieve the same things that you are, and have that, that kind of backboard, so to speak, that you can bounce things off of, because it can be a lonely road, right? Even Ed Milet in that podcast that you're talking about that you sent to me, he talks about how it's a lonely road, and he says the reason why you're feeling imposter syndrome is because you're going on a road that's windy. It might be icy. It might be snowing, raining. You're by yourself. It's dark, versus the other road that most people are on it's nice and sunny. It's straight. It's well kept. There's, a lot of people on it. It's highly crowded, so you don't feel alone. And that's because that's the route that most people take. We are not talking to those people. We're talking to the people who are maybe on that path that want to get off that path and go down this path, because you don't have to take a lot of action on that path. You got to take a lot of action on this path. And the thing that's funny about imposter syndrome, at least for me, was when I was brand new to sales or business or whatever, I didn't feel imposter syndrome. I just was so new. I didn't even know what I was doing anyways. I just took action. And it was like, the more success I had, the more imposter syndrome I felt. It's like, your first $100,000 month, and then maybe the next month you don't hit it, and you talk about it, and it's like you feel like you need to be hitting that every single month no matter what, and you just start to it's just these little things start playing in your mind, like, just like little demons, little negative things, like you're not really good enough, that was a fluke, whatever it is, right? So, or if you have a great month, maybe you had a great week, you had like 3 sales that week, and you never had that many sales in a week, and the next week you don't get any sales, and you're like, man, what's wrong with me? Was that a fluke? Like, am I not really that good? So just a lot of it can be just a mental battle that you have with yourself, for sure. And there's a lot
I think 100%. I think a lot comes from awareness too, and having the understanding that, like, I've always been a believer that the day that you stop learning and think that you know everything is the day that you're going to really start to struggle, right? Because if you have something that you have nothing to, if you're at a point where you have nothing to take away from the experience or people that you talk to, then you're going to think that you literally do know everything. And when you do hit those struggles, if you feel that way already, you're not going to have anything to help you adjust and realign, right? So I don't know. I think having the awareness that there's always going to be someone out there that's better at selling solar than you, or better at acquiring houses than you, or better at doing this than you. And it's just because that is the case, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't know what you're talking about, right? Or that you don't have a skill set to be able to share that with other people and help other people get through what they're trying to get through.
So true, man. And something too that really helps kind of get over it is, you have your routine and you stick to it, right? Like if you want to wake up at 5 a.m. Now, of course, there's days that I miss, right? But I try to wake up at 5 a.m. every day, and I do my personal development and I hit the gym so that I'm just constantly like kind of building those bricks, so to speak, of self-confidence, right? It's like you're getting in better shape, you're hitting better, some PRs in the gym. Maybe you just finished a book. I mean, most people out there, they start books and they never finish them. Now, of course, if the book is not providing you value, like skip it or read a few chapters that do provide value to you. But there's just so many things, just like the stat I started with on podcasts. You start a podcast and then you do 2 episodes and you quit, So if you just continuously do the things that help build self-confidence and wins, like we've talked about in previous episodes, because winning matters and winning builds confidence, that ultimately is how you battle imposter syndrome. Because I feel like the guys even Ed Milet, worth almost $1 billion, talks about how he still feels imposter syndrome every single day because he's talking to like world leaders, or he's sitting next to Tony Robbins, who, is kind of in the same space as him now, but has done 10 times what he's done. So it's something that we'll always feel, but I think it's something that you want to try to figure out how to kind of battle faster, so to speak, like build the muscle where it's like, okay, that thought came into your mind. How do I change it to a positive thought instead?
Yeah, no, that is so true. I mean, it is building a muscle, and you have to figure out how to combat it, how to go through it, and how to make it so it doesn't handicap you for taking that action. Because, that's so important. If you stop cold turkey and stop what you're doing because you're starting to feel that type of way, it's just going to be more and more downhill from there. Right. So,
sure.
Yeah, man, it's a crazy concept of feeling like, and the other thing is you don't need to worry about how long it takes, right? If we're going to hit 20 podcasts, if it takes 6 weeks to do that, cool. If it takes 6 months to do that, cool. It's more just like, hey, we've got there, we've stayed with it, we've stuck with it, and been able to go and do that. Same thing with how many sales you're going to try to make, or how many houses you're going to try to acquire, right? It doesn't have to happen necessarily tomorrow, right? You can give yourself a break, give yourself some time. And I think the biggest thing is always learning, just constantly be learning, and never put yourself in a position to where you're overconfident and think you do know everything, because then the imposter syndrome at that point will hit you a lot harder when you realize that everyone's just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, so true, man. And you kind of made a thought hit my come to me when you said that, is a lot of times too, imposter syndrome comes from comparing, right? Like, and a lot of times we're comparing ourselves to somebody's chapter 20. You might be on chapter 5. Like, we study a lot of Pace Morby, and he has 1,600 doors, 15 businesses or whatever, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And he talks about how he picked up 12 houses in a single day. And you're sitting here like trying to get one a week, or whatever it is. And you're comparing yourself to somebody that has literally years upon years ahead of you, or whatever it is. Alex Ramosi, he's my exact same age. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, so you compare yourself to guys that they had completely different upbringings. They had completely different journeys. Everybody's journey is different. So I know social media probably enhances imposter syndrome a lot more than maybe like our ancestors felt. Like, I bet our great grandfathers might not have felt imposter syndrome as much as we do today, because we're able to see the 18-year-old YouTube millionaire, online that you otherwise wouldn't have known about back in 1920, or whatever.
Well, it's a
So,
double-edged sword too, because there's something to be said for the reach that you're actually able to have, right? Versus before social media, you might have only been able to reach your small community or local community, whatever, or had to travel to do all these things and really not able to advance that next step. And now you're able to impact the, you know, 18, 20, 25-year-old that lives in Washington who's doing the same thing, who you would never have a chance to meet, right? Just because of the way technology has advanced. But yeah, like you said, on the flip side, I mean, you see a lot of people, and it's easy to compare yourself. And I think from comparison, there's just a natural human behavior of jealousy that comes along with it, right? Yeah. There's a level of jealousy. And Naval Ravikant says, if you're ever feeling jealousy because of comparison, you can't just switch that one aspect of your life with that person. Imagine that you had to switch the entire life, like one for one swap, right? You had to have their health, you had to have their body, you had to have their looks, their relationships, all that, just to switch their money, and then decide whether or not that you wanted to actually feel that way. So I thought that was a very interesting way to combat it, because you would 9 times out of 10, actually 10 times out of 10, there's no one in this world that I would want to 100% switch places with, because it would mean that my relationships would be different,
Yeah. I mean, you have a child, you would have to give up that. And it brings it to perspective that money isn't everything. Money is a tool, essentially, to allow us to buy freedom, to buy experiences, memories, things like that. But it's definitely not, money can create happiness, I believe, but it's not happiness. Like, if I gave you money, you're not going to just be happy that you have money now in your hands. Like, what actually creates happiness is you spending it on something, right? So, because it's a tool. But that's such a great point, man. And that's such a great book. Like, the dude's a gangster.
Yeah, he has a lot of great theories and beliefs on things, and perspectives. I mean, just taking a different perspective. But even what a lot of people forget is, on a reality show, on social media, whatever the case may be, you're seeing such a small snippet of most people's lives, right? And it's like 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there. And then think about throughout your day what you go through, and like how you could make each day sound like a much, much bigger win. And I think that's what inhibits a lot of imposter syndrome, because you don't know. None of us know, unless you were attached at the hip to every single person that you followed and look up to, what they actually go through, what they see. Because I guarantee you, there are things that they have throughout their day that isn't necessarily great, right? But it's the ability for them to kind of compartmentalize and overcome and combat that as well. So.
Well, and, to go back to social media, I mean, it's such a powerful tool. It is a double-edged sword. You can, a lot of the guys that are very successful that talk about social media, they have teams that run it to where they don't have to get on it. Like Ryan Pineda, Pace, they don't necessarily consume a lot of content. They just post a lot of content. And so it can be a powerful tool, but then also not, right? But then, like, I'll talk to my fiance all the time about how I want to post more online because it's a powerful tool. But then I get imposter syndrome because I'm like, my life is kind of boring. It's like very redundant. Like, every day I wake up, I do the same thing. It's not very glamorous. Like, I feel like I live in a really cool place, but, and on the weekends I go and do stuff sometimes. But during the week, like, I'm at my desk, 10 hours a day, making calls, talking to reps, talking to you, doing just non-glamorous things. You know what I mean? And so it really mentally throws a wrench in my thought process of like, this isn't cool to like post. But then maybe it is, maybe I'm just in my mind, in my head, that like people should see this. Like, hey guys, this is what you want to do, sales like this. You want to grow a business like this. This is literally what it takes. You have to wake up early. You got to grow your mind, grow your spirituality, work out, and then grind your ass off for freaking 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And you know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, even honestly, like, just a solid 8 hours. It's more of like, how many people go out 8 hours a day and literally just they're distracted for those 8 hours, right? It's not really true deep work. And that's what a lot of misconceptions there are out there. Even on social media, there's a lot of people that talk about, hey, you got to work 15, 16 hours a day to be able to be successful. Like, that's also not true, right? Like there's a ton of other people that combat that and say the opposite, but it's more about the fact that it doesn't really matter, right? Like it's whatever works for what you're doing and what your goals are, because at the end of the day, like, you know, our goals don't necessarily affect a guy like Alex Ramosi, right? Like it doesn't matter. So like comparative stance on how much you need to work or how much you need to do, yeah, that's great for him and his goals. That's how he views it. But for us, if that's not, if we aren't trying to swap lives one for one, then maybe that's not what we need to do and what we need to be taking action on. And that's why imposter syndrome and being able to communicate our lives differently is, you know, it's just a different perspective on a topic that maybe other people have perspectives on. And I think if you only view it one way, you're limiting yourself significantly. I think it's good to consume and see other views that people have. And I mean, me and you bounce ideas like this off each other all the time. And I like it because it may open up something that'd be like, oh, I didn't think about it like that, you know?
No, 100%. You know, hard work is such a funny thing too, because yes, you have to work hard, right? But you're so true. It's not how many hours you work, it's what you get out of the hours. Like Alex Ramosi talks about, he wakes up between 4 and 5 a.m. He works till 4 p.m. and he has a 2-hour gym window in there too. So, you know, I mean, that's more than most people, but it's still not as many as like Elon Musk likes to say that he works like, you know, he's an alien or something. And then our top sales rep probably works the least hours of every other sales rep on our team, but his skill set is so good that he gets away with it, you know, and he still outperforms every single person, even though he doesn't.
Yeah, and with that too, I mean, it's another thing, like his goals, what he's trying to accomplish, that fits for him, right? And as you, I mean, naturally, you're obviously going to improve just by getting the reps in, right? And that's going to cut down the amount of time, the amount of people that you need to talk to. So for him, I think that it works. Now, on the flip side, there could be someone that looks at him and says, hey, man, like if you did this for 10 hours, you would do twice as much deals. But I mean, he might not want to do that, right? There's a push-pull with everything. And Mauricio Urmanski was talking about the 3 segments of a day, right? You need 8 hours of sleep. Like there's really no way around it. You need 8 hours, 7, 8, whatever. It's all kind of relative. 8 hours for working and 8 hours for family, right? And if you're gonna spend more time with family, it's gonna come from either your sleep or your work, right? And if you're gonna work more, it's either gonna come from your family or your sleep. So it's kind of one of those things that there's always gonna be a push-pull, and depends on how you want to live your life and how you want to pursue it. So
That's so true. You know, another thing too about hard work that can really get to you, we talked about this morning, is when you're working really, really hard for long periods of time and you're not getting the result that you necessarily want, then you sit there and you like second guess, which you always need to be analyzing. Okay, am I making the right decisions? Am I working on the right things? Because a lot of times that is the problem. You know, you're working on maybe more admin types things that aren't bringing revenue, because ultimately revenue can handle a lot of problems. You know, you can fix a lot of issues. I remember in a franchise I was in, the top dealer, he would always tell me, Zach, money fixes problems. If you have an angry customer, you can fix that situation with money, you know? So that's just something that, you know, like Andy Frisella, how he's like, for the first 10 years, I only made $65,000 building First Form. That takes a mental level to continue to do that with only making that amount of money. And now obviously it paid off for him. I mean, the guys, you know, First Form is probably $1 billion company, but it definitely takes a mental toll on you if you're not winning.
Well, I wonder too, I'd love to, I'm sure he has a zillion podcast episodes, but I wonder too, like, I just haven't heard him say it, him thinking during that period, right? When he's going through that and making that, like, where was his thought process at? Where was his vision at? And how did he overcome, like, oh shit, am I climbing the right mountain? Because the last thing you want to do, right, is climb, get to a peak, and then look around and see a mountain that you could have climbed and be like, oh shit, should I have been doing that? So periodic reassessment is definitely, it's good. Because I mean, at the end of the day, time's what you can't get back. So you want to make sure that where you're spending your time, and that's what me and you go back and forth with all the time, is like, there's so many shiny objects out there, and there's always going to be shiny objects that you want to go pursue and chase. And I think we go back and forth of like, okay, well, what do we need to make to feel like this is worth it, right? Over the next 3, 5, 10 years versus maybe looking at something else, sacrificing more, and what that turns out to, you know what I mean? And constantly evaluating that. I don't even think a lot of people think about that, to be honest. I think a lot of people just go mindlessly through time in life, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're 5 years down the road, and they look back and they're like, well, what did I really even do? Where did I get to because of this? You know what I mean? And that's going back. I'm sure you feel the same way with routine. I've noticed that when you live a very regimented, highly focused routine every single day, all the days blend together. So like the days feel long, everything feels long that you're going through, but then you look back and you can't pinpoint a specific day. So ideally, I don't think that you can live a life without that. I think you have to have some boringness and redundancy, but there does need to be an element of being able to sprinkle in a day that you'll never forget, and being able to pinpoint that day, like, hey, that was a great day. Like, I remember that shit. You know what I mean? And that's something that I want to really focus on going forward, is having those days that I can pinpoint and remember, so they're not all exactly the same. But I noticed that I feel the most confident and comfortable when I am just focusing hardcore on a routine, waking up, hitting the gym, getting after it for sales. Like, so.
I agree. I feel the same way. And to touch on what you're saying as far as climbing the peak, Warren Buffett has a famous quote that says, it's not so much about how hard you row, but what rowboat are you in, right? And so I'm always thinking about that. Like, am I in the right rowboat? But then that can also be a mind fuck too, because you could be in the right rowboat, right? The right vehicle, right business, whatever. But you're so focused on wondering if that's the right one that you're not actually, rowing hard enough, so to speak.
Yeah, I think there's still, it does take time for that momentum to just continue to accelerate you, right? So there's an element of like in the beginning when you're rowing really freaking hard to try to get it going, then that's what you're questioning, like, should it be easier than this? But since you haven't been there before, you don't really know, right? Like, it's just, you're taking it off of other people, and everyone's going to have a different level of tolerance for the amount of work they're able to do, and think of what's easy and what's not. Things come naturally to different people.
Well, and then you talk to people too that hit the level you're trying to hit, but it's a totally different season now. Like we talked to people who hit 9 figures in solar pretty quickly, but that was 5 years ago. It's a totally different space now. There's a lot more competitors. There's a lot more regulations. Finance charges are way higher. Like the whole entire landscape of solar is way different than it was 5 years ago. And so when you talk to people who are like, yeah, man, we were doing 9 figures 5 years ago, it's like, makes you feel like, okay, cool. We can get there by that time too, but you might not be able to, because it's a totally different landscape now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. That's such a true point. And then to kind of go way back when you were talking about posting on social media and the imposter syndrome that you feel, I noticed that when we had a VA just posting on our behalf, it's a lot easier, because you're just like, you don't think about it. You're like, hey, like they're doing this. I don't care how many likes or comments I get. Like, screw it. Like, they're just posting it. Versus like, if you're sitting there trying to come up with a caption, you're overthinking what is like what you're going to post. You're thinking about things like, damn, like, does this sound stupid? Do I know what I'm talking about? And then ultimately what happens is it boils down to like, screw it. I'm just not going to post it.
Yeah.
And then that, like, you stop taking the action, right? But you hear guys talk about it all the time. You go back to my first social media post, however long ago or whatever, it's going to have no likes, no views. People are going to be shitting on it. Like, now, obviously, you get to a point, but it's just crazy. Like, I don't even know if that ever necessarily goes away.
No, it doesn't, man. And it's funny too, because like the videos that I work the hardest on, I'm like, this is a great video. Like, I hit all the points. Like, I have a good hook in the beginning. Like, this is going to be fire. And then it doesn't, like, it gets no love, you know? And then like the most randomest shit, like a clip from this podcast that I'm like, I don't really even know if this makes sense, but screw it, I'm posting it. It gets a ton of love, you know, it gets a lot of views or whatever. And it just, I know there's an algorithm. I know there's people out there that mastered it, but I have no idea how that damn thing works. And it seems like it's constantly changing. So
Yeah. I mean, exactly. That's another thing that's constantly changing and evolving. So you never really know. And I mean, we're always going to be our biggest critic. So you're just like, man, did that make sense? Did that sound stupid? Am I talking in circles? Like, shit, even right now, I'm just like, I don't know if I'm providing any value to anyone. But ultimately, what this is, when we get on here and talk about it, it's more just the books that we've read and the podcasts we've listened to, being able to summarize and put it into our own ideas and then share that with someone who may never stumble across those books or podcasts.
And experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
That we've had too, you know, which obviously plays a huge role also. So, but no, it's so true. I mean, obviously we know there's people out there who are feeling the same way. There's people out there who aren't at the level that we're at yet. Not saying that we're at a massive level by any means, but we are at a much bigger level than we were last year or 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And so there's somebody who is us 5 years ago that can get value from this 100%. And you know, it does come back to the volume thing. If you just take massive action in anything, whatever I've taken massive action in has always ended up in a positive. And so that's what I tell myself about social media. I'm just like, I'm just going to continuously post every day. Eventually, you know, I can hire the social media coach. I can have the full content team. I can have the thousands of dollars in lighting and all that crap. And I've just simply posted and done so many videos that, or podcasts or whatever it is, that I talk better. You know, like when you watch guys like Ryan Pineda or Pace, they're so calm. They're just so like and even now it's getting way easier. I remember our first podcast, I had like, you know, butterflies in my stomach. I felt like sometimes I wasn't breathing. Now I'm just kind of just chilling, you know, like whatever.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think it's funny that you bring up a point, like people are where we were at 5 years ago. And when you look back 5 years, you look back and you're like, damn, that like wasn't that long ago. You look back and think about it, you're like, it really wasn't that long ago. I can remember doing this. I can remember being that, like, wow, that was already 5 years ago. Versus if you look ahead 5 years, you're like, damn, 5 years, that seems like freaking long ass time away, right? And I think part of that is because as you develop more knowledge and thoughts and things, you can control more of your direction, so that what may have taken you 10 years to reach, you'll be able to reach in 5 because of what you know. So I think that kind of plays a role into it, because you learn more along the way. And as long as you're continuing to apply it and taking the action, you'll get there a lot faster. So 5 years really is, you know, what may have been 10 if you weren't really aware of what you're doing.
So true, man. And you have more resources, more skills. I mean, you look at these guys like Elon Musk, you know, he made $200 million in 1 year. I mean, $200 billion in 1 year, whereas it took him however long to build PayPal and sell it. And that, you know, he only made, I don't even remember what he made, but I don't even think it was $1 billion when he did that, you know? And so everything is relative, right, to time. And like you said this morning is, especially when you have kids, I don't have kids yet, but you know, you really start to see how fast time really does go by. And then also how much can happen in just a 1 year. You know, when you look at your daughter and how much she's grown in 1 year, you're like, wow, like a lot really can happen in 1 year.
Yeah. You definitely forgot who said it, but you overestimate what can happen in a year, but you underestimate what will happen in 5. And that's a very common thing, I think, for a lot of people. But it's funny you bring that up. Is I was talking to my wife yesterday about how I used to be very big on like future thinking, and like being able to kind of just picture myself in these scenarios and whatever. I have a harder time doing that now because of my daughter. I think, right? When I was able to do that, I knew what I looked like. I knew I could put myself in these positions like mentally, versus now, like I think, and I'm like, she's such a big part of my life that in 5 years, I can't picture what she's going to look like, what she's going to be like. She's going to be there wherever I'm at. Right. So it makes it a lot harder. But then also too, I think I naturally don't let myself get there as much because I know that I'm going to miss these days and I don't want to wish them away. I don't want to wish when she's, 5 years old, like that's going to be crazy. It's a whole different dynamic there. And so it's given me a major appreciation of the present. And it makes the future seem further away, which when I translate that over to like business and life and work and all that stuff and hitting certain milestones of success, it makes me feel like that's way too far down the road for me to be comfortable with and happy with. But one thing that I heard Alex Hormozy say was, you're always living in the good old days, right? You're always, at some point, you're going to look back and be like, damn, man, remember when we were recording podcast 5 and we had like 2 people listen? Like, that was crazy.
Yeah, no kidding. Which, by the way, guys, on YouTube, smash the like button, subscribe. We do have almost 1,000 plays on episode 3, I think. So thank you guys for tuning in. But no, it's so true, man. I mean, I don't have kids yet. It's just me and my fiance. We can literally do whatever we want. And so it's like I want to get to the next level we always want to get to the next level, but so true. I mean, I know I'm going to enjoy having kids, but at the same time, it's like I enjoy my being selfish right now. Like we can go eat dinner whenever we want. We can wake up, go do whatever we want. Like we don't have anybody other than our dog that we essentially have to make sure is going to be taken care of. Like last weekend we went on like a little staycation, and we could do that. Like not that I couldn't do that with a kid, but it would have been a totally different situation. You know what I mean? So, and then when I have a child, just like you just said, I'm going to be I don't want it to grow up, like we have a good buddy of ours who has a 6-year-old and it's like his little sidekick, which I'm sure Millie will be the same way with you. So
yeah, no, I'm excited for it by all means, but at the same time, I try to be like, you soak it all in and you envision yourself that in some of the moments and some of the things that can help you being present and having more gratitude is pretending that you're like an 80-year-old man, remembering back on a moment that you're currently in and looking back and putting yourself in, like seeing it from that perspective, because then you'll appreciate that moment so much more. Because at some point in your life, you are going to look back and be like, damn, like that was cool. Like it was cool that we were doing that, So
yeah, that's so true, man. And that is actually a great way to end this podcast. I mean, guys, if you're out there, think about you are living the best day today. You don't want to be 6 years old again. You don't want to be 15 again. You are living the best day, the good old days today, like Dan was saying. So remember, if you're listening to this on podcast, give us a 5-star review. We are on iTunes, Spotify, and Anchor. So please give us a 5-star review if you liked this. Also follow us on Instagram. Let us know how you're doing, if we can help you guys in any way. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, smash the like button, subscribe, and we're going to drop another episode either in a couple days or next week.
Hell yeah.
Rock and roll. See you guys.